Hey, I'm Chris Morrell, co-creator of Verbs. A little while ago, I recorded a video on how to build a simple to-do app using Verbs. And one of the main requests that I got in response to that app was to do a video that focuses more on how to use state in Verbs. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's get started. I set up a simple little application. We're going to imagine that we're a sticker shop that is building a shopping cart. And so we have just two rules that we're going to enforce here. Obviously, this is just a bare bones implementation, but we want to make sure that our shopping carts have a maximum quantity of any individual sticker. So you can't add, say, 100 copies of the same sticker to your cart. And we also want to make sure that stickers are reserved once you add them to your cart for some period of time. So imagine that I have, 2 copies of a specific sticker left in stock, and someone adds 2 copies of that sticker to their cart. We want to ensure that no one else can add that sticker to their cart, at least for some period of time. So I put together a very basic sort of fake shopping cart command. It just kind of like loops through a list of actions and asks for a quantity and then just fires an event. So we have an item added to cart event. We have an item removed from cart event. We have a checked out event, and we have an item restocked event. Okay. And I don't think there's anything in here that's particularly noteworthy other than the fact that it's just firing events and doing nothing else. So I've put together these 4 events. They're totally empty. And this is where we're going to get started. So I think a good way to start with something like this is to just kind of like stub out generally what these events need to do. So item restocked is just, we need some way to tell our system what the current stock of the item is. So all this is really going to do is like add quantity somehow for a given item, right? Item added to cart. So let's see here. Let's go and go back over to our README. And look, we need to make sure that carts have a maximum quantity per sticker. And actually, let's just copy these over. And we're just going to say, these are going to be 2 rules that we need to enforce when an item is added to a cart. And then we need to add the item. Oh, there we go. I can type. So item removed. What do we have here? We're basically going to need to like sort of reverse these 2 items and then remove, right? So if we're removing an item from a cart, we need to make sure that we're accounting for that maximum quantity, to decrement some value if we need to. And we also need to release some sort of hold on a sticker if there is one. And then in checked out, essentially, we're going to, I guess the way I'm kind of thinking about this is there will be this like reservation system for items so that like, if I put a sticker into my cart, maybe I have it reserved for 5 minutes or something like that. But I feel like from a user experience perspective, imagine that I let something sit in my cart for 6 minutes, and it's still in stock, but my reservation has expired. I think that we should just resolve that for the user. We shouldn't like make them add it back to their cart or something like that. So basically we need to like check final stock, right? And then check out. So I don't know, we may adjust this as we go. I'm just kind of doing this as I go. So we'll see where it lands. But I think that's a good starting point. So I'm just going to start with item restocked so that we have a way to add stock to our system for testing purposes. So let's get started here. So we're going to need, we'll probably need some sort of quantity amount, right? And we're going to need to somehow apply that quantity to something, right? We're going to add that amount of stock to something somewhere, right? So in verbs, the way we do this, when we're kind of in event land, as I like to call it, is we are going to apply our event to state. So here we're going to say like basically something, something quantity plus equals this quantity. And so this is where state comes into play. This is this something. We need some place to hold a value that understands what the current stock of an item is. So I'm going to run a verbs command. We're going to create a new state, and we will call that item state. And there we go. And item state is just going to be sort of a plain PHP object that lets us, keep track of the state of a given item. So if we go into item state, there's nothing in here, but we can go in here and we can give it a quantity. If I can type, there we go. And we'll initialize that to 0 if we don't have any state for a given item yet. And so if we go back into our item restocked event and give ourselves a reference to that state, so we'll do public item state item. And then over here, instead of something, we can say this item quantity is going to be incremented by the quantity of this event. And the nice thing about verbs is if you just type in a state on an event, you can just pass in the ID for that state into the event and verbs will auto resolve that for you. So given an item ID, verbs will just load the current state for that item for you. So this is pretty much all we need to do to adjust the stock of a given item. And we could maybe go into the shop command and go into the, let's see here, where are we firing? We're just firing these events just straight in like a closure here. So in our restocked item, we're just like firing this restocked event. We could then just say like, get the state. We're going to say item state, and we're going to load it by the sticker is the value that holds the ID. This is just coming from our select sticker method, which just prompts from a list of predefined stickers. So we can get our state, and then we can just say like info, where's the, updated to quantity. Maybe like stock updated, right? And if we hop over into iTerm and let's see here, we're going to run artisan. I think I called it cart. Nope. What's it called? Shop. And we restock items. We're going to pick the verbs sticker and we're going to stock 4. We'll go back. We'll restock items. We'll do verb sticker and we'll stock 1 more. And now it's updated to 5. Great. That's basically what we wanted. And really, we just needed some way to update that value for testing. So now we have a way to know what our current stock is. I think, adding an item to the cart is going to be the next step. So let's think about how this needs to work. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is we're going to need some sort of value constant or something like that that tracks somewhere, what this maximum is and sort of like what the reservation time is. And for testing purposes, especially in this case, I think I'm going to make them like a configurable, or maybe we'll make this 2. Just static properties on this event, and that way in our tests we can set that number to some arbitrary value for testing purposes without having to do a bunch of work. I probably would have a more sophisticated way to do this in a real application, but I think that's going to be fine. So we know we have some sort of limit on the number of items, and then we're going to need like a hold time. So let's just say, like, for right now, we'll say like you can hold an item for 5 seconds, and that's just going to make it easy for us to demonstrate. Obviously, this would probably be like 60 or some large number. So those are just going to be kind of configuration values that I'm just going to put here for ease of use. And then in terms of the actual event, what do we need? Well, we know that this is going to also need a quantity, right? So we'll give it an integer of quantity. This is the number of a given item that we're adding to the cart. And we also know that it's going to be related to some item, and it's probably going to have to touch or check the state of that item. So we'll get, access to that item state as well. And then the other thing that obviously this is going to have to do is it's going to have to operate on some shopping cart somewhere. So let's go back in. We're going to create a new state, and we'll call this cart state. And for right now, we won't even touch that state, but we know that we're going to need some reference to the cart so that we can add the item to the cart. So next, let's go down our list. So we are going to need to do two sort of validations. And Verbs has a lifecycle hook for that. So if I add a public function called validate, and in Verbs, if you can name it validate, you can do multiple validations just by prefixing each function with the string validate. And you can also, if you want to like validate each state individually, you could do something like validate cart and type hint the cart state here, and that would be just sort of like an easy way to get to that cart. But in our case, we'll just have a single validation. And these two things are going to happen in validate, right? And then let's skip over that for now. We're going to also do an apply. And in here, we're going to add the item to the cart, right? So let's do that first, I think. Let's go into cart state. And essentially, like, it's going to need an array of items. And is that it? I mean, for right now, that seems like it. So now if we go over here, like, we basically, let me think about this. So, we're going to be doing a lot of things sort of having to do with the quantity of a given item in a few different places. So my gut says that in this cart state, this items array, I think that what we'll do is we'll just make this an array that's keyed by the item ID, and then the value is the current quantity of that item in the cart. So what we can do, let's see, we're going to say this cart items, and then we will say this item ID, right? So we're going to set this value, and it's going to be this quantity, right, plus whatever already exists. But we don't know that there's already items in the cart, so we just need to say this cart. Yeah, exactly. This, we just want to add it to either the value that we already have in the cart or 0 if we don't have a value yet. And so that essentially, gets us the items in our cart. And we could even go into the shop command. Let's go into this action function, item added to cart. So let's think about this. We can just, for right now, let's just do we'll get the cart is going to be what? Cart state, load this, and we're just storing the cart ID as a value on the event right now. And honestly, like, let's just dump the cart's items for now. That'll probably be the simplest. And so if we go back into our shop and let's just add like one verbs sticker to our cart. All right. I guess 1002 is going to be the ID of the verb sticker. So if I go and add another one, there we go. We've got two of them. But, if we go and we add like a PHP Philly item, it happily lets us do it, even though we haven't stocked any PHP Philly items yet. So like, it shouldn't let us do it. So that's going to be sort of our next step is in item added to cart, we need to do these validations. We need to make sure that we are enforcing both that there's a maximum quantity per sticker and that there's some sort of reservation system, right? So let's go into, let me think about this. In our cart, I think that it's going to be helpful to just have like an easy way to get the current count without having to do the math, without having to do a bunch of lookups in other files. So let's just give ourselves like a count method, I think. We'll say like, give me an item ID and I'm going to give you the count back, right? And look, that's perfect. That's just going to be an easy way for us to check that first value. And my instinct says this is maybe I should have written it here and then refactored it later, but my instinct says that we're going to use that in a couple places. So let me just write it there. So this one is going to be the easier thing to validate. So let's do that first. Verbs gives you a little function called assert that you can call in your validate function. And if you just give it an expression, if the expression is falsy, then Verbs will throw an exception for you and the event will not be allowed to fire. So I can say this assert, and we're going to have two things. We're going to have the assertion. So in this case, it's going to be this cart count, this item ID. So the count needs to, I guess we need to get the count plus this quantity. Oh my gosh. So we have to assert that the total number in the cart plus the quantity that we're trying to add to the cart is less than or equal to the limit that we've set, right? And if this fails, we'll just say like, reached limit or something like that, and that seems fine for right now. So we're just going to check that we've reached a limit and we can actually, let's go ahead and do it. We will go back into our shop. We're going to add an item to our cart. We'll add 2 verb stickers and then we'll add another verb sticker and we should get an error. Yep, we've reached our limit. Cool. So stickers in cart are temporarily reserved. Oh, nope, wrong one. Carts have a maximum quantity per sticker. That's the one. And I just want to take a second, like all of the things that we've done so far, absolutely you could do with traditional eloquent models. And it would work perfectly fine. But, we would already be in a place where, we'd have a carts table, we'd have a cart items table. We'd be storing a lot of relational data that was pretty much exclusively just for this validation. It wouldn't really matter to our application UI a whole lot or some of this data wouldn't matter to our application UI a whole lot. Wouldn't really matter. It's relatively ephemeral. It only matters during the checkout flow. And that tends to be a place where using verb state is a really good option, where, where obviously all this stuff can be done in many different ways. But if you are tracking data that's really only important for ensuring that future events are allowed, that's when you start to reach for state. In traditional event sourcing, this is sort of close to what would be called an aggregate root, but I've heard the term a decision model used recently, which I think is a really nice way to think about it. The stuff that you're storing in your state is really data that's necessary for making decisions about future events. So in our cart state, this number of items is really just so that we can track how many of any given item is in our cart, so that we know whether more items can be added or we know whether items can be removed. And similar in our item state, we just need to know the quantity of a given item so that we can ensure that that item can be added to a cart, right? So that's sort of like the beginning of validating this event. But this temporary reservation is going to be a little bit more complicated. So let's think this through. When we add a sticker to a cart, we want to essentially place some sort of like hold on that sticker for some period of time. And so we'll go backwards, we'll place the hold, and then we'll validate the hold. So like down here in our item state, let's give ourselves like an array of holds. And this is going to be, where we store the data about the data about what holds are active and when they expire and such. And so in our item added to cart, we can say like this item holds, and we're gonna what are we gonna do? I guess, do we push something in? I think maybe we do the same thing. We just say like we put a hold for this specific, or this cart ID. We'll do it the inverse. So we're just going to say the current hold for this is something. And I'm trying to think, what do we want? We want like, I guess it's going to need a quantity, right? We won't set those yet. It's going to need a quantity, and then it's going to need like an expires. And this we know is just going to be like the current timestamp. I'm just going to do this plus the number of seconds that we define as our hold, right? And the quantity, we're going to need to account for the fact that like we might already have an existing hold and that we might be updating it. So maybe what we can do is first, we'll just like sort of initialize this to some value if it doesn't exist. And then we can just go down here and we can just say like add to the quantity. We'll just add this quantity to the hold. I think that works. And the nice thing there is the hold then would only sort of like, it would start from the time that they added the first item. It wouldn't like, you wouldn't be able to like just be able to get a new hold by like adding a new copy of the sticker and then removing the copy of the sticker or something like that, which I think feels good. We may have to tinker with this. I'm not sure. But let's think about it. So now now that we have like a hold on the item up here, we need a way to essentially say like, are there items available? So this is actually, we can start simply and then address the hold, because you know you know what, let's write this in pseudocode first. Like we can basically say, given like get item quantity, right, and then you know, subtract this quantity, and like we want to make sure that that's greater than or equal to 0, essentially. And I think, again, maybe this is an early optimization, but I think this is going to make sense. Let's go over to our item state and let's just like give ourselves a quick way to get the current like the current number of items that are available, right? So well, you know, before we do this, sorry for jumping back and forth here, but before we do this, like we can start by just saying like this assert that this item quantity is greater than or equal to this quantity, right? And if not, it's going to be like out of stock, right? So before we even worry about holds, like this is something that we would have done anyway. We want to make sure that the quantity that we have in stock is at least the quantity that we're trying to reserve. And like we can even look at this, like let's put like one over engineered sticker in stock, and then let's like try to add 2. Yep. That we want to enforce even before we worry about the hold. So that makes sense. So then the only thing that we really need to do is like, instead of looking at the quantity, we need to find a way to like apply the holds to that quantity to get like an available number. And that's kind of where I was jumping to, right? So we want to return this quantity, but we need to subtract the sum of all the holds. And we need to do the sum of all the holds that are active, right? So this minus, and what are we going to do? We're going to say like we'll collect this holds, right? And let's extract this out to a variable real quick, or a helper function, because that's just going to be a little bit annoying. So let's call this active holds. And what's this going to be? This is going to be like, I guess, I mean, while we're doing this check, we might as well update it, because anytime an item gets expired, we don't need to store the hold anymore. So let's just say this holds equals, and we'll do array filter, this holds, and this is just going to be like we have our hold, and we just want to say like the hold expires is greater than the current timestamp. And we can just return this, because this will return the holds array. So that gets us all of our holds with any holds that have expired filtered out, right? And so we can then maybe give ourselves a variable called held that's going to be, we'll take this active holds, and then we will get a sum of the quantity. So that's going to be the number held. And honestly, well, and then we essentially just are going to return the quantity that we have in stock minus the sum of the current active holds. And I think we can just inline that. It doesn't need to be a variable, right? So just to review this and make sure that I got this right? Our active holds is going to be all the holds where the expiration is in the future. And then the number of a given item's availability is going to be the total quantity in stock minus the sum of all of our active holds, right? So if we had 2 holds for 1 item each, and we had 4 items in stock, we would expect available to return 2. And so now if we go back to item added to cart, instead of quantity, we can just say available. And I think that that should do it. We're going to, when we're adding an item to the cart, we're going to assert that the total number of available items is at least the quantity that we're trying to add, and that the total number of items in our cart of this type plus the amount that we're trying to add is doesn't go over the limit that we've set. Then once we've checked those 2 things, we're going to update our cart, the quantity in our cart to be the new quantity that we're adding plus any existing amount that's already in the cart. Then we're going to create a hold if we don't already have one, and we're going to add the quantity that we're adding to the cart to our hold. That seems great. Okay, so let's go and test this out. We're going to open the shop, and we're going to open the shop in 2 separate sort of sessions, as it were. And I'm gonna go over and let's just get a full fresh migration, so there's nothing no items are stocked or anything like that. And we'll go over here and we're gonna stock 2 PHP Philly items. Now over in our other tab, let's go in and we will let's add both of those to our cart, right? Now back over here, let's try to add 1 to our cart. Oh, it's out of stock. And it's not, there's still 2 items in stock because, the shopping cart hasn't, we haven't checked out, but those items are held. But I think we only set it to a 5-second hold. So now if I go and try to add an item, now I'm able to do it. So, so that kind of gets us that temporary hold step. Cool. So let's go back to our README. So we've implemented these 2 requirements. We could, we'll go through and let's do the item removed from cart and checked out just to kind of like go through the whole flow. But already, I mean, just to step back again, if you think about it, implementing this in Eloquent now has gotten, again, much more complicated because not only are we dealing with carts and cart items, but now we have item holds, right, with quantities. And when you're, when you're adding an item to a cart, you're probably going to, you're going to load the item and like eager load the item holds. And then you're going to have to filter out the item holds that have expired, or maybe you do that on some sort of cron tab or something. I don't know. And again, it's all perfectly doable, but it ends up being a lot of work and a bunch of database records that are really only there to serve these 2 questions, right? Which again are kind of ephemeral. They only matter for the short term that the cart exists. And so you'd end up, inserting and removing hundreds of thousands of records potentially over time that really don't matter at all other than for this very short period of time. And, by tracking it in state, these are just values on objects that are tracked over time. If we need to start to track more data, we don't have to refactor our database. We don't have to do anything. We just add a new value to our state and potentially replay our events if we need to. And we're good to go. So let's go over and look at item removed from cart. So, like I said, we need to kind of reverse these two things. Maybe that's going to be implicit because a lot of our values are just like sums of something. So we can probably just remove amounts and they will get reversed automatically. But let's think this through. So we're going to need a cart state, and we're going to need a public item state, right? So we are removing this item from this cart, and let's give ourselves a quantity as well so that we can like remove 2 of an item from the cart if we want to. And first, I like sometimes to do the apply first and then do the validate, because a lot of times what happens in your event application sort of informs what things you need to validate. So essentially what we need to do is say like this cart items, this item ID, is essentially this minus this quantity. We're just subtracting, and we can even just do this. That's gonna remove this number of items of this item from the cart. And then we also are going to need to decrement the number in our hold if there is a hold. So we'll say if is set this item holds this cart ID, right? So if we have a hold for this item, for this cart on this item, then we need to do something with it. We need to we're just going to reduce the quantity here as well, right? And so what do we want to validate to ensure that these two things are possible? Well, we want to make sure that the amount in the cart is at least, the quantity that we're trying to remove. I mean, we could just do something like max 0. We could do something where we just kind of normalize it ourselves, but I think it makes sense. You don't want to remove 3 items from a cart that only has 2 items in it. So this assert, and what are we going to assert? We're going to assert that the quantity is greater than or equal to this quantity. And I guess since we don't know for sure that there's going to be a quantity, let's actually say count this item ID, and that way if it doesn't exist, it's going to return a 0. And if that fails, there aren't this quantity. Yep, there aren't 3 items in the cart to remove. This we're going to do as a conditional because, holds, we know that holds will expire. So we don't necessarily have a guarantee that it's there. So I think it's better to just check it and only perform this logic if it exists. So I think that that's our entire item removed from cart. We can try. So like we'll add one to our cart and then we'll try to remove two. Yep, there aren't two items, but if we go to remove and we just remove one, great. That works. And so the last piece is checked out. So yeah, we're going to need to somehow check our final stock, and then we're going to do something to check out. And this is where I'm really just showing the state and validation logic. In reality, here there's going to be like a handle function, and this is going to actually do something, right? So once all the items have been added to the cart, once we've validated that the cart, that the items are in stock, that there aren't any, that all the holds are still valid, et cetera, we're going to have to initiate something that actually triggers people putting those items into an envelope and shipping them off. We're not actually going to implement that here, but that would happen in handle, which handle happens once all of the events that have been fired in the current cycle, so either request or command or whatever, or a queued job, once all the events in the current cycle have committed, then we run handle on all those events. So essentially that ensures that all of this validation logic has passed, all the states have been updated appropriately, and that all of our events have been written to the database, so we know that they've actually sort of been memorialized in our application. And once that happens, we would call handle. So eventually, that's where this application would go. But for right now, let's just figure out what do we need to do to our actual system to check out. So when we check out, it's going to take a cart state. And that's probably it, right? We're just going to check out a given cart. So when we apply this, right, now we're actually checking out. So we need to actually update the current stock of each of these items, right? So we'll just loop over this cart items. And this is going to be item ID, and this is going to be quantity, right? And we'll load that item, the current state of that item. And this is perfectly fine. We can work with other states even if they're not referenced on the event themselves. This is something where I think eventually Verbs will probably have some nicer APIs to do this, but this is perfectly fine for now. And we're going to say we need to do two things. We need to update the quantity, the stock, and we also need to unset any holds that we have. So we'll say, item quantity is going to be decremented by quantity, right? So we're going to say, we had 4 items in stock. We're checking out with 2 items. So now there are 2 items in stock. And then we're going to say unset item holds this cart ID, right? So if there is a hold for this cart, let's unset it because the cart is now checked out. We're actually updating the quantity, so now the hold doesn't matter. And I think that's pretty much it. All we need to do, maybe we'd want to do something like, this is probably a good thing to do. On our cart state, let's give ourselves a public Boolean. Checked out is false. And realistically, in here, we kind of want to say like this, assert that this cart isn't already checked out, right? Because you shouldn't be able to add an item to a cart once you've checked out. You shouldn't also be able to remove an item from a cart once you've already checked out. So that's just like a good little practice. That way we know for any given cart, what the state is. Maybe this should be like a string that's like the status or something like that. Oftentimes I find these Booleans turn into sort of state machine type values, but this is fine for now. So then in our checked out, we also want to say this cart checked out is true, right? So once we've gone through and updated all the items in our cart to have the new quantities, we also update our cart to say that it's been checked out. That will prevent future items from being added, and we can add this to our validation for the cart. So we'll do the same thing. We'll go in and we'll say, what do we need to validate? So first, we'll do the same thing, right? We want to make sure that the cart hasn't already been checked out. And then the other thing that we need to do is, our holds are only temporary, right? We're only holding an item for 5 seconds right now, I think. And so we want to sort of validate that the actual final quantity of each item is still available, right? So we are going to just do sort of this same for each loop, right? We're going to loop over each item, and we're actually going to do the same thing. So again, there'd be maybe a refactor to not duplicate this code, but it's fine, right? And we're going to say like the amount held. Well, let me think about this. Yeah, we need to get the amount that is actively being held. We can't use our quantity helper because that's sort of just like doing a sum of all the holds. But we need to like sort of account for the hold of this specific cart. So what do? We're going to say like item active holds this cart ID, right? That gets us the active hold for this cart if it exists. And then we want to get the quantity. And if that doesn't exist, we just want to get 0, right? So first we figure out how many items are still actively being held for this cart. And then we want to like assert that that the number held. Let's see here. How would we do this? We want to make sure that the number of held plus the number available, or not this item, item available, right, is at least the quantity that we are trying to check out with, right? So again, we load our item, we figure out how many of this item are being held for this cart, still actively being held for this cart, and then we want to make sure that that plus the additional available items is at least the quantity that we're trying to check out with. And this maybe should be something like some items in your cart are out of stock, right? And so that looks pretty good to me. Let's hop over here and let's see, how would we check this? So let's get ourselves a fresh database. So we're going to restock. We're going to put 2 PHP Philly stickers into our cart. We're going to add those 2 PHP Philly stickers to our cart. Now we're going to go over into our other cart. We're going to wait those 5 seconds. I think it's been 5 seconds now. We're going to add 2 to this cart, and then we're going to go here and try to check out. Yep. And then if we wait 5 more seconds for that other hold to expire, now we should be able to check out. Yay. So that pretty much gives us everything that we were looking for. We're able to track state across these multiple events and use that state to validate the events to make sure that anything that we're trying to do is actually valid within the current state of our application. And I think that given, the relative complexity of the features that we're implementing, I mean, we implemented them very simply, but tracking these holds and tracking quantity across multiple different shopping carts and just inventory in general is not like a simple thing to do. But I would argue that by keeping all of the logic around that validation kind of isolated to each individual event and sort of tracked across these 2 different states as it made sense, I think that it's a pretty nice way to work. And I think that for this type of complexity, using events and states is a really nice way to approach that problem. So I hope this was useful. I know this was a little bit of a longer video, so I appreciate you making it this far. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.